Windmill Wisdom would like to thank the Texas Cattle Feeders Association in Amarillo, Texas, for allowing us to shoot this episode on location at their headquarters.
Thank you guys. We're back for another episode of Windmill Wisdom. Today we're going to be shooting at Texas Cattle Feeders. We want to thank them for allowing us to be here today to use their facilities. We appreciate everything that Texas Cattle Feeders does. I may actually give Robby a little bit of opportunity to talk about Texas Cattle Feeders before we leave today. I'm going to go around the room. We've got a really good panel of folks here today to talk to you about some issues around risk protection and liability. As we move around, I'll start off with Robby. So Robby, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Robby Kirkland. I live out at Vega, Texas. I manage our family-owned operation Feedyard as well as our farming operation, and been out there for 24 years and got the 3 kiddos and my wife Amy, and that's a little about us.
That's good. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Myers. I'm the owner and operator of Myers Crop Insurance Agency in Claude, Texas. I actually live at Goodnight, which is between Claude and Clarington, and I have 2 boys, Brooks and Reese, and my husband Scott, and we also operate a Cowcalf operation there.
All right, my name is Tiffany Lashmet. I'm an extension agricultural law specialist with Texas A&M. My family has a ranch in New Mexico. My husband and I live at White Deer. We're raising a couple of little ones, and we've got some cattle, sheep, and some farm ground as well.
All right. Well, thank each of you guys for being here today. One of the things that we try to do with Windmill Wisdom is just get folks together that work in certain fields in agriculture and around land ownership issues, legal. Tiffany's here representing the extension office today. We like to help bring things together for folks that want to know where to get more information. And there's really no limit to what we can talk about today in this session. It's a diverse group of folks. So I want to start up with Robby. Robby, I know that you work around the feed yard and the farming operation, do a lot with cattle. Today we talked about bringing some topics around, mitigating risk, covering risk, and those type of things. We'll just let you kind of start, and you can tell us what you guys do with Kirkland Feedyard, with the feed yard, and all of that. So.
Yeah, so at Kirkland Feedyard, we're primarily customer based operations. So we're about 90% customer based and 10% company owned cattle. So we have several services that we do, and one of them would be helping folks with the risk management, and whether that's through the grain or mostly with cattle. I mean, that's really where people most see their risk. And we all know that there is risk with cattle, with the grain as well. But so, what I do is I try to talk to folks, and everybody has a different risk tolerance. And so that's what we try to talk about and say, all right, what's your risk tolerance? What are you willing to risk, basically? And so we deal with people all the way from cow-calf guys, which is a big hunk of what we do, their retained ownership all the way through. And then we have guys that go out and buy cattle or run stockers or buy stockers, or some that are actually just investor type feeders. So all those different aspects of producers have different risk tolerance. And so that's the first thing I do is I just visit with them. If they want to do some risk management, say, all right, what's your risk tolerance? What do you want to limit, on that risk? Are you willing to limit the top side or limit the bottom side, and then try to build a strategy around, what kind of fits them and their risk tolerance?
I would think when you're talking about this too, just so the folks out there really get what you're saying, is you're talking about a couple of different aspects too, because as the feed yard itself, when you bring their cattle in, one of the things that you risk to take care of for them is herd health. Sure. The health of the animal, but also you're talking about pricing. Yeah. Locking in prices so that all of this works.
That's right. And so, and you're absolutely right. On the herd health, that starts a long time before they ever get to us.
Right.
And visiting with people, trying to help them, get the right vaccination, right timing, right nutrition in front of those cattle before they ever get to the feed yard. And so that's done kind of before we ever see those cattle. You know, the risk management from the price standpoint is more, you know, using the CMT and using the futures board to try to protect, you know, price protect cattle, or, you know, limit that risk at some point.
Well, and you brought up an interesting point also, and I think, you know, definitely around what we do with Windmill Wisdom, we're trying to get resources out to landowners, but that goes hand in fist when you said Cowcalf Operators,
Yeah.
because what I've heard from you when I've talked to you more than once is that you guys are seeing guys take them all the way from when they're born all the way to the very end, and I think that's cool because you're enabling maybe a person with 50 to 100 cows or something like that to feed them all the way out. Because is that right?
No, that's right. I mean, if you kind of go and look at our customer base, we have guys that have maybe as few as 50 head of cows, to, you know, one of our bigger customers, probably pushing 9,000 cows.
Right.
And so you've got a wide variety of different type of people, and like I said, different type of risk that they can experience. So, that's what we really enjoy, and is working with those customers, the cow-calf guys, and like I said, those retained ownership type guys, because it's been interesting, and I learned a lot from those guys. You know, it's a two-way street, and so you know, the mentality of a lot of these guys that are retaining ownership is that, you know, they're going to market a fat animal rather than marketing a feeder, marketing a calf, and so, you know, and they work really hard on their genetics, work really hard on their health program, and then, you know, in this world of cattle, or the cattle, you know, the beef business, we talk about that it's, you know, you work on averages. You sell on averages, you buy on averages, but, you know, if you can move the needle in your genetics and your health herd to beat the average, that's where you can take advantage of it. And so if you're just average, it's just going to you're just going to be average. But what I've experienced are the guys that kind of push the needle and push the envelope on their health and their genetics, and they are above average. So then we're able to utilize different things. We're able to utilize, you know, value-based marketing, things like that, to help those guys, you know, bring premium back to their herd.
It's interesting to have. I want to go around and let the other guys talk, because it was when I thought about this group and we were putting them together, because each one of you guys are producers and y'all deal with cattle, so it'll be interesting to hear what these guys have to say in those lines. So, Rachel, you got anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, even though we're in two totally different businesses, with me selling crop insurance and Robby owning you know, custom cattle feeding business, there's so many similarities in what he said about what he does with his customer base. Because from a crop insurance standpoint, we're in the exact same boat. I have customers that own the land 100%. They are not making land payments. They may or may not have an operating note. And so they may be able to take on a little bit larger risk, therefore choosing a lower level of coverage, paying, you know, less premium, versus I may have customers that the land is financed, the operation is financed. You know, they may be brand new young producers. And so everyone is in a different place when they come to us. And, you know, that's one of my recommendations when talking to customers is take the time to give us your backstory. You know, tell us where you're at. And I'm not asking because I want to know, you know, the intricacies of your business or your financial status, but yet sometimes knowing those things helps me make a much better recommendation of trying to help them protect what it is they're after, because some may only be trying to hit a break even with crop insurance. Others, we may need to be beyond break even so that we can also cover variable costs, fixed costs, etc. So, you know, every customer is different, and I always want them to be as open as they honestly can. And, you know, when someone is brand new, especially coming into our business, when they've either never had crop insurance before or they are seeking a new insurance agent, you know, that's where I think that we really thrive, is taking the time to sit down and go through basically, you know, it's a mini business plan with them of what their goals are, what they want to achieve. And I think at that point we can pull in your traditional crop insurance products through the multi-peril. We can add crop hail insurance if that's what we need to do to get them beyond a break-even point. And then a lot of times we'll find out that they're livestock producers as well. And so we can go through all of the risk management products that are available to the livestock sector, because that's been, I'm not going to say an untapped sector, but people traditionally think of crop insurance as row crop.
Right.
They are there for, corn, cotton, milo, wheat. But in reality, we have products to help protect landowners that have grass, pasture, hay, whether it's alfalfa or an annually planted hay. There's so many more products that have been released in the last 10 years that a lot of people just have not gotten the word on. And so, we encourage them to come talk to us. Tell us what you have, and let us see if we can make a recommendation that would just be, all encompassing for your whole operation.
Well, and the underbelly of that ties in with your guys. I mean, before they ever get to you, there's products out there probably protecting their range.
Yeah.
The things that they're doing to get those calves. I mean, where they're growing the calves, they'd end up in Robby's Feedyard.
Sure, a lot of the background on our pasture, range, and forage product is to try and protect, the landowners that have, range land, and we've obviously been subjected to drought over, I would love to say the last, 5 to 10 years, but I'm pretty sure where we live, we're going to be, we're somewhat in an arid climate. So,
Right.
Drought is always a part of our history, but with a product that can help protect against that, it allows us to then be, paying funds back to these people that purchase the insurance policy to help pay for supplemental feed. We may be what pays for the cake that got them through the winter to get the cattle to the feed yard when wheat pasture has played out or whatever it may be.
I remember back in I had a background in for a time in crop insurance, and I can remember it always being referred to as a safety net.
Yes.
But really, the entire risk plan that a person has, from their marketing plans to their crop insurance, all those things together really are what create that full safety net.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Tiffany's here today with us and talking around some issues around just liability, and the things that you can do to protect yourself there as well. But Tiffany,
One thing I might mention, I think that what you guys have said is fantastic, and I think that the first thing is, if you're in this business and you're wanting to make sure you've got yourself protected, find yourself some good advisors, some good people that can help you, like Robby, like Rachel, right? Robby can help walk you through some of these herd health type things, helping walk you through, are we going to, hedge in the futures or whatever. You've got Rachel who can help figure out what different types of products are available. I mean, 5 years ago, I think a lot of guys didn't even know about pasture, PRF insurance. We didn't. I mean, I came to you, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. She's our insurance agent. We didn't even know about it. And so that's something, if you get somebody who's knowledgeable, who can really help walk you through those things, I think that's something really important. As far as extension goes, we've got extension economists that are located around the state. Here in the Panhandle, we've got Dr. Justin Benavides. He's fantastic. Somebody else who can help you look at different sorts of marketing plans, to look at different things like hedging, like crop insurance, and really help make all of that work together. I think finding somebody who can help you fit those pieces together is really important.
Great. Well, Robby, along those lines, when you mentioned something, and we've all touched on it, but understanding that customer is for the same thing that I run into as a real estate agent, because when I deal with folks and they're either needing to buy or sell, I mean, one of the things that you got to understand is their appetite for risk.
Yeah, that's right. And it's one of those things that we all know that, there's risk and there's reward, okay? And so you can limit your risk, but you're going to limit your reward a lot of times. And so a lot of guys have to figure out that, and they have to understand that, okay, the market, we can protect it from going to here, but you know what? If it goes up, that's going to hurt your reward. And so that's where a lot of guys have to, understand. I use the insurance analogy a lot, and when we use options particularly, they are sort of an insurance type event, or kind of a product.
Right.
And so we talk about, because a lot of people understand the insurance.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't necessarily understand futures and options,
Right.
So much. And so we try to put it in terms of what are we trying to insure, what are we trying to insure, against, and people begin to understand it.
Well, and you were mentioning understanding your person buying crop insurance, but I know in the last few years with products like enterprise units, things that come in that can have the ability to really help you do a good job if you're a larger scale producer,
Sure.
but at the same time understanding what that means to give up those optional units.
Yes, it's so important that we, I feel like that is a huge part of my job, is just constantly educating producers on what they're getting themselves into. Just like you said, it's the risk reward relationship. How much risk are you willing to take on, and how much can you afford to take on? And that sometimes is, sadly, that is the bigger portion of our conversation is, call your banker. Let's bring them in as well. Sometimes this needs to be a 3-party conversation, because while you may be able to cut your premium down to, a third of what it would have been. You risk so much more, and can you afford that? It's similar to what we've talked about in our own family operation with hedging and when we fed cattle. We have to be able to play next year. So like Robby's saying, everybody wants to hit the top of the market. Absolutely. Like, we all want to be winners, but sometimes the only opportunity we have is, do we play again next year? Can we put ourselves in a position where we meet our margin goals, we make money, we're going to go again? Because, you can't jump into something, whether it's your farming operation from a crop insurance standpoint or feeding cattle, and be so risky that you're one and done. No one can sustain that. And the market swings now. I know Robby can talk about this so much more than I can, but 10, 15 years ago, we can see a bigger move in the market now in a day than we would see in a 6-month time period.
Exactly.
And that has changed the level of education that our producers have to have when they're getting into, cattle feeding, stocker cattle. Even from a cow-calf standpoint, you can't just sit around. Being a price taker is a thing of the past if you want to be sustainable.
Well, and that's a great point. We're fixing to have to take a break for just a minute, but when we get back, let's get a little deeper into that, and we'll be back here in just a minute. Thanks.
Windmill Wisdom would like to thank Robby Kirkland, owner and operator of Kirkland Feedyard, and his family farm operation. Kirkland Feedyard is home to a combination of customer and company-owned cattle. Their business is managed with the realization that each day they are producing food to help feed other families. To contact Robby, you can go to the mequicklink.com/Robby Kirkland, or you can click the ME Quick link in the video description below.
At M. Edwards Realtors, we believe in the right mix of old-fashioned values combined with cutting-edge technology. We know presentation is paramount, and we are serious about high-quality video, photography, and maps. We also know that information is key, and will work hard to help you make informed decisions throughout your transaction. Not only are we your real estate professional, our team has experience in farming, ranching, ag lending, conservation, and risk management. Whether selling or buying, let our experience go to work for you.
Okay, we're back. Had a really good first segment talking about risk protection. I've got Robby Kirkland, Rachel Myers, and Tiffany Lashmet here today to join us. Let's go ahead and let's get right back into this. When we picked up a while ago, we had been talking about folks' risk aversion. I think when we're looking at risk, just the word itself covers a lot of things. But when we get into taking that to the standpoint of how can we take these advisors, Tiffany mentioned getting trusted advisors that help you in these things. And we've had in some of our other Windmill Wisdom episodes, one thing that has always come to bear that is a central truth that we keep coming back to is deal with people that are dealing with these things over and over again. Benefit from the mistakes that other people made so that you don't make them again. I'd like to give y'all a chance to talk about a few of the things, pitfalls that y'all might see that you see people falling off into sometimes in risk. And I'll pick up with you, Rachel.
Sure. I think, and especially directed towards the landowner themselves, a lot of times in our crop relationships, we've got, landlord-tenant relationships. A lot of the tenants will be handling the risk management for that landlord. I have some that say, get them the cheapest thing that's available. I have others that say, do whatever I'm doing. Well, that's great, but I think I'd like to encourage landowners themselves to possibly, talk with your tenant, absolutely, but to also don't ever feel, hesitant in reaching out to the crop insurance agent. From my standpoint, I love those phone calls. I welcome them. I would love to talk through what they are seeking in their level of protection, and not to cut their, tenant out whatsoever, but for those landlords to also step up and play an active role in that, because they have a lot at risk as well. That may be an investment property. It may be their kid's inheritance. There's a lot of things that are behind that land. It may be a 100-year-old farm that's been in the family. Right. There's so much to it. And so I think that would be, that's an area that I do see some weakness, that possibly we're not meeting all of the risk management needs there just due to that lack of relationship.
Communication. That's
Absolutely.
What we always come back to here. Is
so many people are afraid to call. They're like, I don't want to waste your time. Well,
right.
that's what I get paid for. Like, please waste my time.
Right.
Like,
right.
it makes me better. I like people. I like that relationship, and I want people to feel that comfort level, just like you're saying, with their advisors, whoever that is, that they can pick up the phone and call. A lot of times, if you'll just call and ask the question, it is so much better. I can do a lot better job keeping you out of hot water if I know what you're up to. So
well, and I know you're an agent that does have meetings. You encourage and have meetings for your producers, but it is hard to get those landowners
it
sometimes
is,
to
and
come to
some
those
of them
meetings.
live in California and Missouri and all different places, and so we try our best to maintain those relationships if we have them. But a lot of times, I've never met these people, never talked to them, because so much is being handled through their tenants. So
True.
Yeah.
Robbie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and something Rachel said that kind of stuck out is I get the calls a lot about, talking about risk and talking about, what we're doing, and that's what they say. Well, what are you doing? And so that's what and I said, well, you can't necessarily gauge what I'm doing versus, because everybody's got, like we said, a different risk tolerance, and mine may be moving. I mean, I've watched the market a lot closer because that's part of my business, and so you have these guys that have ranches and their business is producing beef cattle, and so they're not sitting there watching the futures market, and so I may make a move, on kind of a spur of the moment because I see something happen in the market or whatnot. So I said, you can't just do what I'm doing. I mean, I understand. I'll tell you what I'm doing and give you the pros and cons of what risk management I'm taking, but don't just lay it in my lap and say, here, do what you're doing. So
It's a lot more of a snowflake scenario than it is a cookie cutter.
yeah,
I mean, for lack of a better term.
yeah, it is, and I think people just they either need to have a plan or don't need to have a plan. I mean, ultimately, you got to decide: am I going to be a risk manager or am I not? And if I am, then I need to be consistent with my plan and have a plan, and then stick with it, because trying to hit highs and lows, we always know in the markets, whether it's crops or cattle or whatever it is, you're just going to be lucky if you catch that high.
Well, somebody said during the break, and I wanted to bring it back up because I thought it was a good point, but there's always folks that think that they're going to be the one that beats the system. The one that always can game the system. And I'm sure there's guys out there that are smart enough at times that they do benefit. But if your real goal is risk protection, I think that's the thing. That's who we're probably talking to more today, is how do I protect myself against a big mistake that could put me out of business, like you said, so I can stay in the game and protect the legacy that I'm trying to hold on to here. So, that opens up another topic, and that's one thing that I think Tiffany's going to dig into a little bit more. But when we talk about risk protection, a big issue that's come up over the last few years has been liability. If you own land, what are liability issues that you need to be aware of? We're going to talk about a lot of different things today, but just touching on the surface, there's new things that have come up in the last few years because of some of the practices that are being implemented on the farm and on the ranch. So I'm going to jump over to Tiffany and let her talk about this for a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different when we're looking at risk management from a liability perspective, because we're focused a lot on if somebody comes on your property for whatever reason and gets injured, what could you have done to protect yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not something maybe every year you're thinking about. You're thinking about crop insurance. You may not think about this all the time. But I can give something that's a little bit more of an absolute maybe than we've given, and that is every landowner needs liability insurance, period. I don't think there are exceptions to that. I just think that they do. I also will go a step further and say every agricultural tenant needs liability insurance.
Absolutely.
And the fact of it is, look, something can happen, and it can happen in an instant, and you never thought of it. It never occurred to you there could be a problem. And the next thing you know, you're facing this multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and without that insurance, you're in big trouble. And so having liability insurance in place, I think, is important. I always like to preach this a little bit. There are sort of two benefits to insurance from the liability perspective. We're all pretty familiar with, we have that coverage level where they'll pay a claim up to that amount. But the second thing that it provides you is a defense, right? So if something happens on my ranch tomorrow, somebody gets injured, my first phone call is to my insurance agent. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to hire me a lawyer on their dime to defend me. That's worth a lot. And so I think that's something that we can easily overlook. And another thing I'll say on liability insurance, the liability portion is generally not that expensive.
Right.
And you think about, well, we got our farm and ranch policy, and gosh, it cost this much. Well, most of that was your property coverage, right? So your barn, your house, etc. If you look just at pricing the liability portion or increasing liability, from one to the next, generally not that expensive. I mean, we've got a place, and again, everywhere's different, but we've got a place that we leased that was about 100 acres, and we had, I think, $500,000 in liability coverage. costs $65 a year. I
Right.
mean, for crying out loud, it's crazy to roll the dice on if something were to happen there,
Right.
and not spend $65. And so, just having that liability insurance, I think, is really important. And again, we'll go back to having good advisors. You need to have a good insurance agent who understands your operation, understands everything you're doing, to make sure and help you analyze that you have the right level of coverage and the right scope of coverage that covers everything you've got going on.
In a way, it's a lot like that same calculation you're trying to do for your risk tolerance. I mean, at the same time, what is my exposure, here with this, and what could I handle, and what kind of deductible? Because I know you think with liability there's no deductible, but actually there kind of is. You base that coverage limit. I can remember back from my insurance days, echoing what you said about the cost of liability. I could never get people interested in talking about their liability insurance, it seemed like. But really, it was the best bargain that we had of everything that we were selling.
For sure, yeah.
And I think you're seeing more people buy it now for some other whatever reasons. But I think echo her statements. Everybody needs. If you own an asset, you need liability coverage for that asset, especially something like land.
Yeah, well, the fact is, look, if somebody gets injured on that land, it may very well not be the landowner's fault. They may get the case dismissed. The court says there was no liability. But do you know what it costs to hire a lawyer and get a case dismissed? A lot more than $65, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
it's just good money up front when you're looking at, risk level. Spend the money on the insurance if anything ever does happen. Because the other thing is, if there's an accident or an injury on the property, they're going to sue the landowner.
Absolutely.
Whether you have a tenant, whether you aren't there, whether you live in California and the land's in Texas, that landowner's going to be named in that lawsuit 9 times out of 10. And so again, having that insurance in place to help deal with that is really important.
And that's something that's coming up more and more, because I can take a pin in just about any county, drop a pin and look at the land ownership in a 7 to 8 mile radius, and you're probably going to cover 20 states in most examples because of what's happened over the last few years with ag. I mean, kids have gone off, took jobs in other other states, other areas in the metropolitan areas, and so we've got a lot of folks that have interest in our land in our backyard that don't even live in Texas and don't even understand Texas liability. And vice versa. I mean, you may own land in other states, and you need to have insurance agents and people that are helping you that understand the laws of the state in which you live.
That's right, and the other point I was going to make ties into that, talking about the laws in Texas. There are a handful of limited liability statutes here in Texas that apply to Texas landowners. And so there's kind of 3 that I talk about. One's the recreational use statute, there's the Texas Agritourism Act, and there's the Texas Farm Animal Liability Act. Each of those give limited liability protection by statute to landowners in certain circumstances. So the recreational use statute applies if somebody comes on your property and they get injured doing a recreational activity. Hunting's the big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got hunters, you better read up on that recreational use statute. It's free limited liability if you meet the requirements. The Agritourism Act, same deal. It applies to ranch land, farmland, if you've got folks coming on doing a recreational or educational purpose. So, if Robby's going to bring people out for some sort of field day at the feed yard and he's got people coming, that recreational use statute might provide, the Agritourism Act might provide some protection there from that educational purpose. The Farm Animal Liability Act offers some protection if the injury is caused by a risk inherent to a farm animal activity. So, how many times have we seen we put a kid on a horse, send him down the road, horse bucks kid off? That statute can come into play there and can dismiss a case if it's an inherent risk. And so, educating yourselves on what statutes exist, what you need to do to make sure those apply, can be a cheap, almost free way to really help limit your liability as well.
That's really good advice, and I think it's just knowing how to get to some of this. Again, a point that we made in our other windmill episode that you were on. Tiffany's an excellent resource for information. Going through the extension office and using what AgriLife has put out there. She's got some publications. We haven't mentioned that on this episode, but she put out a landowners publication that talks a lot about. She's got several sections in it, but it's an awesome resource, and you can get that. Didn't you say it's posted? Go ahead and tell us where that's at.
Yeah, you can download the PDF. My blog is the Texas Ag Law blog. There's a PDF of that. It's called Owning Your Piece of Texas, and there's a whole chapter in there on landowner liability, and talks about those different statutes and how they apply, as well as different things, fence law, water law, etc.
And going back to that, I was thinking about that when you mentioned the agritourism, because that's becoming a bigger deal. I think it's important to get people out on the farm. I love the fact that our state has put in some protection for that, because educating this next generation of youngsters about where things come from, where the beef that's on my plate comes from, where the milk that we drink comes from, where the food that we grow for clothing and all those things, because it's such a big issue to me, having grown up in ag. I was a agricultural student and went through FFA and 4-H, but also got my college paid for through an FFA scholarship. But I feel like each one of us that has worked in agriculture needs to be ambassadors for agriculture as we go out. And Robby, I know y'all do a lot around that. I see some of the stuff that y'all post. Y'all bring people out to the feed yard.
We do. Of course, we do a lot on social media. My wife kind of runs that campaign, and then we have kind of open door, and we kind of were challenged about 5 years ago to kind of tell our story. And we just, we hear that if we don't tell our story and it's not the right story, somebody else can tell the story for us. And so we've been an open door. We have youth events out there. We have youth tours. We have, being right there close to Interstate 40, we have people that come through Vega and they want to see a feed yard. And so we've opened our doors to letting some of those people come on and see what we do. And, we know we do things right, and we work hard at what we do, and there's nothing to hide. And so, we're open for people to come out and see what's going on at a family-owned feed yard.
And I wanted to bring that up because I know Rachel's got a background too, where she was involved in things earlier in her career, where you were working for was it the Wheat Growers Association?
I did. I handled communications and public relations. I did some political work for them as well through various farm bills and things like that. And Robby's absolutely right. And I grew up in agriculture. I was raised on a family farm and ranch that's been in our family since the mid 1800s, and so proud of that heritage. And I think all of us are so proud of our upbringing and know what truly happens in agriculture and on the farm, and want to raise our children the same way. But we are terrible at getting out and sharing our story, and I think we've become so much better at that. But it is exactly that, and I want people to know that if you have questions, while I encourage you to look on social media and read about agriculture, ask someone who's really in the business, because all of us will tell you our story and how we came to be, and the love for the animals that we have, that we all raise. So
well, and that's a good we've got to take another break, but that's exactly why I like bringing people together to do these Windmill Wisdom episodes. So when we come back, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about these issues a little bit more, and we'll be back in just a minute. Thanks.
Windmill Wisdom would like to thank Rachel Myers, owner and operator of Myers Crop Insurance Agency. Myers Crop Insurance Agency helps farmers and ranchers choose the risk management products that fit their needs. Not only do they work with just farmland, they also work with pasture, forest, and rangeland. They serve the Texas Panhandle as well as parts of New Mexico and Oklahoma. To contact Rachel, you can go to the mequicklink.com/Rachel Myers, or you can click the ME Quick link in the video description below.
All right, we're back, and this will be the final segment of our Windmill Wisdom episode. We've had a really good discussion today about a pretty broad area of topics, but I wanted to get back in. We were talking about liability and talking about the issues that come around that, but one issue that has become a bigger issue the last 4 or 5 years probably has been chemical drift. We've had chemical drift built into liability insurance policies for years, but Tiffany, if you could just tell us a little bit about how important you think chemical drift coverage is today for landowners and for farmers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and Rachel could speak to this more, I think, from the crop insurance side, but when you're looking at potentially spraying chemicals on your property, whether we're talking 2,4-D or dicamba or whatever, making sure that you do have liability coverage in the event that something happens, right? In the event that you drift onto your neighbor, that's where your liability coverage is going to be so important. And it's important to make sure that your insurance policy does protect for your negligence if there's a chemical drift situation. There are some policies, I've seen them written here in Texas, where they might be $1 million policy, farm and ranch liability policy, but there's a cap on chemical drift damages at $25,000, for example. There's a big difference between $1 million and $25,000, right?
Yes.
And you don't find out about that sometimes until you've got a problem. And so I really encourage people, if you're doing any sort of pesticide, herbicide application, make sure that you have an insurance policy that covers you for that type of application. Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about when drift does occur, what rights and potential for recovery your neighbor has. the best thing you can do as a person applying that is have that liability insurance.
Yes. And Rachel, one of the points you brought up is that a lot of folks don't realize that their crop insurance doesn't really cover.
Correct. Yeah, there is not a specified peril that is covered in a crop insurance policy for any sort of drift damage. You know, there are remedies that we have as far as not impacting those producers for the loss of yield on those acres that were damaged. We can take care of some things there. However, we do not pay claims for this, and that is a large misconception as well. We get a lot of phone calls. You know, this year's been an interesting year. We've had a lot of crop losses, a lot of secondary crops being planted, so that kind of changed up the chemical mix of what's being sprayed out there. And it rained a lot at the end of May, you know, right in the prime weed growing season, so everyone is spraying right now, and we're seeing some drift damage onto the cotton acres that are left out there. And you know, your multi-peril crop insurance that you pay a large premium for is not going to protect you in that case. So that's where, you know, you as the landowner may have to seek remedy against whether it is a neighbor or another entity or whomever sprayed your crop at that point. You know, one other point I wanted to bring up there too is that, like Tiffany said, with $25,000 as a limit of liability, you know, people think, oh, that's going to cover it. You have to think that we have crops out there right now that, you know, gross value, obviously the net is different because there are tons of expenses that go into these crops, but you know, we have crops that are gross value $800+ an acre.
Yeah.
You think of a 120 acre pivot of cotton growing, for example, do the math. You know, if you spray that circle accidentally, I mean, no one is intentionally spraying chemicals. You know, our farmers, our, you know, municipalities, everyone goes through training. Everyone is required by the government to have documentation and hours, and they know they can only spray if the wind speed is under, you know, a certain number from a certain direction. However, chemicals drift. You know, a farmer can tell you what types of days they can spray on, but accidents still occur. And so, you know, you just have to think about the dollar value invested. Plus, you know, even in the Panhandle region, we have cucumbers, we have, you know,
Grapes.
watermelons, grapes. You know, there are some extremely high value crops being grown, and you have to consider that when you're putting together that policy. Just like Tiffany said earlier, the cost is not that significant, but your agent may, you know, you may be using the same agent for your farm and ranch liability that does your homeowners, and that's their wheelhouse. They can protect your car and your boat and your truck, but they may not deal with farm and ranch that much. So that may be where you have to take the vested interest and step up and talk to them and say, hey, this is not going to get it. Price me $1 million coverage, and you're going to be surprised that it's not that much more. But just like anything, we're all lazy in our own insurance. I'm an insurance agent. Do I read my own policy? Maybe part of it. We're all bad about it. Don't just let your policy sit there and roll. You know, you may have purchased that 15 years ago. Well, that crop value may have only been $25,000 then. Right. It's now $250,000 or $2.5 million. You know, you've really got to take an active interest in your own protection, and we're all bad. Like, crop insurance agents might be the worst. So
I might make 2 points there just really quick. The first one is, when we're talking about spray drift damages, one other misconception that I get a lot, I just want to mention, is, you know, we understand that TDA is the agency that regulates that, and if there is a drift claim, if you wanted to report it, that's who you report it to. They can conduct an investigation. Sometimes we see fines go into place. Just to be clear, TDA does not collect money that goes to the injured neighbor. So if you're the neighbor whose crop was drifted on, if TDA goes and finds someone, you don't see that money. That goes into, like, I think it's the state rainy day fund or whatever, but that doesn't go to the person. So if you're seeking recovery, it really is going to be a civil matter between you and the person who sprayed. So I just get that question a lot, and I think there's some misconception there. The second thing I'd say, Rachel, and it's a good one on insurance, I'm a big believer in reviewing your insurance policy every year. Now listen, I'm not the most fun client to have, right, as an insurance agent. I did some insurance defense work in a prior life. I'm paranoid, and so, but I promise you, I sit down every year and we flip through that policy, and I sit down with the agent and talk to them about, okay, we've started doing this now. Now we're having sales on the farm and not just on the internet or whatever it is that's different. Do we need to make a change in that policy? And I really think you can't, undersell the value of doing the yearly review of your insurance products to make sure things haven't changed, there's not modifications that need made.
That's a great point. And
you're going to be shocked at what's on there. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I did break down this last year and torture my personal insurance agent for multiple hours. But guess what? We had pickups that were sold 2-3 years ago that whether my husband forgot to tell her to take them off, whether I forgot.
Yep.
I mean, but you would truly be shocked. So, I mean, extremely good point that everybody needs to do it.
Yeah, well, I think about, like us, we randomly lease places for cows, and it's easy to forget, like, oh yeah, we leased this place last year, we didn't think to add it. I think about my insurance when I have to write the check. I'm not thinking about it, in the middle of the month when I move cows to different pastures. So, yeah, it's important.
That's probably one of the most common ones too, having dealt with farm liability, is guys picking up new land and not coming in and updating their legal descriptions.
Sure.
They're paying for coverage, but they don't have that farm listed on their policy.
That's right.
And, a question that was brought up too, you mentioned the vegetables, but another big issue around this chemical drift is organics. Mm-hmm. We're getting more and more guys growing organic crops. I know also in the feeding side, I don't know how many feed yards are feeding organic beef, but I know there's a lot of these dairies around here that are producing organic milk. You really cannot begin to estimate the value of what you could possibly have happen if you have an accident.
Sure.
And so, I think we've got a good neighbor policy for the most part with all of our producers. I think each one of them is working really hard not to have mistakes. But you and I have all lived in this part, or you guys have been here enough to know that the wind can change directions here in the matter of seconds.
Sure.
And, a lot of times those guys are monitoring it every time they get out on the end of the row and turn around, but they literally can just have one little bit of overspray. And the point is, the damage may not be that extensive, but back to Tiffany's point earlier when we were talking about liability, the defense. The fact that an adjuster is going to come out, document what's going on, take pictures, communicate with the other landowner, and do all that for you, that's worth quite a bit.
For sure.
And most of the time, back over my history of liability claims, we didn't have that many of them that ended up being as bad as we thought they were. But gosh, it was sure nice to be able to turn them in.
Sure.
And get them handled. So, Robby, do you have anything around this with the liability side with this chemical? Is this impacting y'all much on the feeding side or with cattle much?
Not really, not a whole lot on that side. I mean, of course, we deal with it a lot on the farm. I mean,
Right.
we use, we're farming about 10,000 acres now, mostly dry land.
Mm-hmm.
We use a lot of chemicals ourselves, and so these are, this whole session's helping me as much as I'm helping in it. But I mean, as far as just things that I think spot on what's being said here.
Well, I really do want to go back and just follow back to this point. And sometimes I think if you watch these Windmill Wisdom episodes, you'll think I like to beat a dead horse. But the point I have, what made me decide to start wanting to do this when we did this a few months ago, was that I continually run into people that are needing information, that they are wanting to make better decisions about what they do. And I just love the fact that you guys are willing to come and spend your time, because get with people that, again, have experience dealing with these things over and over again. Get trusted advisors in whatever realm. There's probably, if you were to sit down and number how many different things land ownership needs to be aware of, what would you say, Tiffany? 12, 13, 14 topics, maybe more. It's limitless.
We have that be just in the book. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you probably come up with hundreds of different things to keep yourself awake at night. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, we talked about it in our last session. This is an awesome thing living in the state of Texas, having the property owner rights that we have, but it's also a huge responsibility, and we want to maintain those rights. So being able to do that, it entails that we have to be educated. And so if you're a landowner and you're hearing this today for the first time, you've watched this episode, these guys are an excellent resource, but don't hesitate to get out there and learn more about owning land. It's one of the greatest benefits you have of living in the United States of America. So I thank you guys for being here. We want to once again thank Texas Cattle Feeders Association. Robby, don't want to put you on the spot, but just thought I'd give you a second to talk about them just a little bit more.
You bet.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you bet. Texas Cattle Feeders, of course, covers all the cattle that are being fed in Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, and do a great job. And they have so many resources that they provide back to us as feed yard owners and managers, and we couldn't do business without them. I mean, they help us with our environmental aspects. They help us with just so many things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, our markets, and so they're a huge asset to the cattle feeders of this area, and we're sure glad they're here.
We appreciate them once again letting us use this facility. They were ready for us this morning, made it really easy. So thank each one of y'all again. we're going to have this posted for several months, so be sure and share it around. And like I said, Tiffany's got a blog post. I'll let you talk about that for just a second before we go.
Yeah, if you just want to Google the Texas Agriculture Law blog, anything I write's posted on there. The book that we talked about today is called Owning Your Piece of Texas. You can download a free PDF on that website.
Okay. And Rachel, just one more thing there with you. One of the things that I know you do are your training sessions. What is that, 2 times a year that you have those?
Sure, depending on how much change we're seeing in, crop insurance and the things that surround it, with new farm bills that are implemented, different things like that. We'll host producer meetings. But once again, I just encourage people with questions, to call. And I won't always have the answer, but we have a great network. I call Tiffany. I talk to people with Extension. We all know where to find the information. And I think that that's such a great resource that, even if you're not sure it fits into a crop insurance question, if you need answers to something, call me, call Tiffany, call Robby. Any of us are available, and we'll get you an answer. So,
well, I appreciate that. Thank you guys for being here, and that'll conclude our episode.
Ag-related legal questions? Tiffany Lashmet with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension is a great resource, and she is there to help. You can also visit her Texas Agriculture Law blog that she keeps you up to date on various Texas ag issues, or her podcast, Ag Law in the Field, where she hosts a variety of guests that discuss their thoughts, experiences, and interests related to ag law. Windmill Wisdom would like to thank Tiffany Lashmet for appearing on today's episode. To contact Tiffany or to visit her blog or podcast, you can go to the ME Quick link /Tiffany Lashmet, or you can click the ME Quick link in the video description below.
At M. Edwards Realtors, we believe in the right mix of old-fashioned values combined with cutting-edge technology. We know presentation is paramount, and we are serious about high-quality video, photography, and maps. We also know that information is key, and we'll work hard to help you make informed decisions throughout your transaction. Not only are we your real estate professional, our team has experience in farming, ranching, ag lending, conservation, and risk management. Whether selling or buying, let our experience go to work for you.